Good morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. We are happy to have you with us. I might be a touch loud. I don't know if that's me or just the headphones, but either way, glad you are with us and a part of the program here today as we get you ready for the big one on Saturday in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Cannot wait for all of that. Huge show to prepare for it all. Like I said, I may be a little bit loud here right now. Anyway, I'm sorry, that's my distraction. I apologize. Just looking forward to an awesome show. Jeff Sentell, who's already there, been hanging out with a bunch of Georgia fans this weekend already. We'll talk to him. Happy Halloween to those of you who are observing that. Our mind is on the cocktail party around here. I got my shirt on today that honors Georgia chomping down on the Gator, so we are just ready for it all. Big preview, all of it on the way, including a little bit of a look at why the Georgia coaches, the Georgia players may be viewing this rivalry matchup with Florida exactly the way that you hoped that they might. Let's begin with that. We're glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now. In many ways, this is kind of the end of an era for the cocktail party. The open air, seeing the St. Johns River and the Hart Bridge and the beautiful sunset. The game is leaving Jacksonville after this year for 2 years. When it returns, it's going to look completely different.
A lot of memories. It's been some really good battles, some great games.
The history of this game before me, so that's why it means a lot to me.
Can't get up for a game like this. You don't need to be playing.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I will tell you, this is a show that I look forward to doing each and every year. It's our show before the Georgia-Florida game coming up tomorrow. Back in the old days, when we first started doing what we called then the Gator Hater Countdown, this was day one of the Gator Hater Countdown, meaning we were just 1 day away from Georgia-Florida. Now we count up because Georgia has such a long winning streak against Florida, and we hope to see that continue on Saturday. And I think a lot of y'all know, if you're especially a regular listener, viewer to the program, I think a lot of you know I'm sort of nostalgic by nature. I just have a very sentimental mindset, I guess. I am, for whatever reason, especially nostalgic when it comes to the Georgia-Florida game. Like, for instance, this morning, like a lot of you, I'm listening to something while I'm getting ready to come in, and I'm listening this morning to, the Clisby Clark, the old school Hunker Down, Hairy Dogs, and some of that music. I'm listening to that this morning just because I like to get into the old school mindset of what the world's largest outdoor cocktail party is, what it's all about. And as the great video from Cody Chaffins that we began the show with today reminds you, in a lot of ways, it is the end of an era for this event. Stadium has been renovated already a couple of times, but after a 2-year hiatus, and by the way, I've already heard from people who are in Jacksonville, if you plan on going, the construction around the stadium's essentially already started. It is I think the potential for a nightmare scenario here, so be mindful of that as you're traveling to Jacksonville. I'm including myself in all of this. But when we're back in Jacksonville again, 2 years from now, which will be, I guess, ongoing 3 years from now, but, 2-year hiatus away from there, it's going to be a completely different experience. There's going to be almost like a retractable roof type thing. I mean, to me, it almost feels a little bit like what SoFi Stadium was in Los Angeles, and some of the imagery that we associate with this game is just going to be a little bit different. Now, different doesn't mean worse necessarily, but it will probably be a bit different because when you're in this venue on Saturday, even though it's been renovated and obviously the Jaguars exist now in a way that they did not exist back in the early days, you can still kind of squint and make this be the same stadium that Larry Munson once implored Lindsey Scott to run in way back in 1980. And that's one of the things to me that's weird about Georgia, Florida, is in a lot of ways, I am nostalgic for an era that I really don't have a lot of an experience with. You know, I've told you before, I was alive during the 1980 season, Buck Belue to Lindsey Scott. Had a chance to hang out with Lindsey Scott this past week at the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame, celebrating with him and mentioned that. I had a chance to induct him in the Hall of Fame, and I made mention of, you know, the great moment there, and I've talked about that plenty of times. But I have no living memory of it. And as a kid, when it comes to Georgia, Florida, I didn't grow up going to this game. I was very lucky in that my grandfather took me to the home games, but we didn't travel. We didn't go to road games. We didn't go to Georgia, Florida, and Jacksonville. I'd watch the game on TV, and you'd see all the adults acting crazy. And that's one of my great childhood memories of watching Georgia football, is how crazy Georgia football made the adults act. That was really strange. But you'd watch all these adults acting so crazy, doing all their stuff, and I would wonder way back then of, well, I wonder if I'll ever get to go to a Georgia, Florida game. I wonder if I'll ever be able to do that. And lo and behold, here we are all these years later, through the good, the bad, and frankly, some ugly when it comes to being in Jacksonville. I've been able to go to this game a long time, and I always hearken back to that era of Georgia fans who made this a great experience before I was old enough to go, that we inherited this from. And now, as I described earlier this week, it's kind of like our Gen X Super Bowl. If you're about my age, you grew up, wanting to see Georgia win this game, rarely seeing that happen. And now that Georgia's the one that's on top in the rivalry, well, you can't seem to enjoy that enough. It'll always mean more to us than it perhaps means to a younger generation of Georgia fans, and I think that's fine. They're making their own memories, they're doing their own thing, and one day they'll tell their own stories, and I'm proud of them to get the chance to do that. But for us, this is a big deal for those of you who are close to my age, and we get a chance to celebrate that again tomorrow. So excited about it. And let me shift to this when it comes to the game. Here is what I think, beyond the X's and O's, which will, at least the on-field product we'll get to here in a little bit. Here is what I think is the overarching theme for Georgia against Florida on Saturday. And this is the sort of thing that I think all Georgia fans should take some time to appreciate. I think you can make the case that Georgia has the exact right mindset that as a Georgia fan, you'd want your team to have going into this rivalry game. This is something we've talked about this week. This is something we talk about a lot, that when you have an alumnus of Georgia as your head coach, there's an appreciation for the rivalries that even if Kirby doesn't always give full voice to that, is real, is significant, and shapes the way in which he coaches this team. He just knows the lay of the land for Georgia football in a way that we all ought to appreciate. And I think that Georgia's approach to the Georgia-Florida game also ought to shape the way that we feel about Georgia going into the rest of the season. I'll explain that in a moment, but instead, let me begin this way. So on Wednesday, Kirby Smart appears at what's called the SEC Coaches Teleconference. This is not like the press conference he does in Athens where we have video of it and it's mostly just the local reporters. This is all 16 SEC coaches having their turn. It's about 10 minutes long, and it's like a conference call type thing. It's if you do Zoom at work or something like that. This is very similar, and Smart fields questions. And the very first question out of the block on Wednesday came from a Florida reporter. His name is Edgar Thompson. He works for the Orlando Sentinel. And Edgar asked Kirby, in the midst of all of the turmoil around the SEC, the fact that Georgia just seems to sail right on through to it, and it gave Kirby a chance to talk about why his program is stable. I play this for you because it actually sets up something else between Kirby and the Florida reporter, but as a way of setting the stage, here is the Florida reporter asking Kirby a question, Kirby describing right now what makes Georgia Georgia in light of all the other SEC teams who just seem to be face-planting left and right. This is from Wednesday.
You arrived at the SEC when Florida was kind of at its peak, and it's struggled to maintain that. Obviously, what do you when you look at your program? Just what's been the key to the stability, continuity that you've been able to maintain there, which other programs have just not been able to do?
I don't really know, because that's a comparison question. I don't, I know what we do and I know how we do it, and been very fortunate, to have great facilities and add things here through our president and our AD. Been very fortunate to recruit a very fertile home base of our state in terms of recruiting, and had a lot of consistency on staff. I don't know how to compare that to others. I just know what we prioritize is important.
So there you have what is basically a fairly basic back and forth exchange. Florida-centric reporter asking Kirby Smart a question about the continuity that they've had here at Georgia and what he thinks about that. And Kirby gives a very Kirby-style answer. Now, all of that is a setup for what happens next. It's one of those things that if you've got this on in the background, you're not paying close attention, you're going to miss this. So lean in just for a second, if you don't mind, just for a couple seconds. Then after that, you can go back and do whatever you're doing before. So the reporter then asks Kirby a follow-up because obviously he's trying to make this be about Florida. And the reporter is like, and this is the cliche you sometimes hear, college football is just better when so-and-so is good. You've heard that said before. And so what the reporter in this case, Edgar Thompson, is apparently trying to set up is a story about how, hey, the SEC's just better when Florida's better. The SEC's just firing on all cylinders when Florida is good. That is seemingly what Edgar Thompson is setting up to ask Kirby Smart about. But I want you to listen to the stiff arm that Kirby Smart gives to the idea that somehow the SEC benefits by Florida being good. It's deadpan, it's sarcastic, it's short, but it's funny. Take a listen to this.
So when Florida's up and running though, what's it do for the overall league? I mean, there's so much parity now. I mean, you can lose a program in a year and you can build one in a year, but what's it just do for the league? I mean, it's obviously one of the bigger brands.
The league's pretty good.
Now, I'd love to tell you that was the end of the answer, but Kirby Smart did go on after that to give, more of a, substantial answer to that about how he thinks that Florida's better than people give him credit for and blah, 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 blah. But the beginning of that, for someone like me, and by the way, you can see I got my Gator Hater shirt on here today, or at least a version of a Gator Hater shirt on here today. The old Jacksonville Bulldog Club logo that Honorable Preserve has made famous. But the point is that as a true Gator hater, Kirby Smart gives you a very Gator hater answer. The Florida reporter there is trying to say, hey, Florida's obviously a big brand. How much does the SEC benefit if Florida gets back on track and all of a sudden Florida's winning games again? Kirby Smart doesn't give voice to that. Kirby Smart doesn't amplify that point. He says, we would say factually true, the SEC is just fine with Florida being as bad as it's been. Now, then he goes on to make sure that doesn't become, a kind of viral clip or anything like that. But the premise of that, we would say, is unmistakable, that no one up here in the great state of Georgia is shedding any tears about the fact that Florida has had failed coach after failed coach after failed coach after failed coach and been irrelevant so long that this year's college freshmen attending this game for the first time have not seen Florida be good in their lifetime. And this year's freshman players and prospective recruits, everything they know about Florida and its bygone age of Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow and Steve Spurrier, that's all coming by way of history book or whatever else because they have no living memory of it. We've really reached the point, and I just now thought about this, I'll say it out loud real quick and then we'll move on. We've really reached the point where me as a kid hearing all these stories about Buck Bellew to Lindsey Scott and how great that was, but deep down, if I was being honest, as a kid who turned into a teenager, there was a point in which I started wondering, am I going to hear this story for the rest of my life, or is there ever going to be a new thing for Georgia against Florida? I mean, if I'm being honest, there got to be a point where, as much as I bonded with my grandfather over Buck Bellew to Lindsey Scott and him playing that audio tape and Larry Munson so great and that was all so amazing and everybody always harkened back to it, 20th anniversary in the year 2000 or whatever else. I remember all of the nostalgia that people had for that moment, but privately, in my private thoughts, I was thinking, boy, it'd be nice if that wasn't the last good thing that happened for Georgia in this rivalry. There got to be a point where I was thinking that way. And eventually those moments came. And now it's Florida fans. I saw Tim Tebow this week. Tebow was going back and telling all his stories. Now, as a much older fella than he used to be, we all are, telling his stories about what it was like to play in the Georgia-Florida game and what his memories were like and how great that was. And admittedly, Georgia got him in 2007. Tebow got Georgia in 08. I guess they won the 06 game when he was a freshman. So yeah, I mean, he won a couple national championships. Those are good memories for Florida. But boy, oh boy, they are becoming distant memories now. We once had to deal with that. Florida's now dealing with that. And I just think that's interesting. But back to the point that I was originally making is that when Kirby Smart is asked about, is the SEC just better when Florida's better? Kirby Smart's like, no, it's not. The SEC's doing just fine. And I mean, you look at, I saw a number yesterday of the 10 most viewed teams in the country so far this season. 9 of the 10 are in the SEC. Ohio State's the only non-SEC team that would rank among the 10 most viewed teams based on television ratings thus far this season. So Kirby Smart's exactly right. The SEC's fine with Florida not being very good, or at least contending for championships here right now. And it's also the sort of thing that a Gator hater might say. And this kind of circles back to something else that we've said this week too, which is there has never been a more Georgia team than this Georgia team right now. This is almost like a Georgia team that's Georgia on steroids, if you will, because you got Kirby Smart as an alumnus who gives the sarcastic deadpan response to the Florida reporter fishing for a pro-Gator narrative, a pro-Gator story. We told you earlier, there was great audio this week coming out of Drew Bobo, the Georgia center, who talked about dressing up like Aaron Murray for Halloween. And there was Chauncey Bowens this week talking about how proud he is that he chose Georgia over the school he was once committed to, Florida. And you can go on up and down the Georgia roster of guys who, man, Georgia means something to them. It's not just the team they play for. It's the state they call home, or it's the family they've chosen within college football. For many people, it's a multi-generational thing. Mike Bobo, Drew Bobo, just you can go through all of that with this Georgia roster, coaches and players. There are a bunch of deep roots. And yet, when it comes to this particular topic of deep ties to Georgia, Gator haters when it comes to this rivalry against Florida, in this particular aspect, everybody today is playing for second. Because I briefly mentioned this yesterday. It is some more story from Mark Schlabach, ESPN.com. I'll show you this on the screen. So in a preview for the weekend, and first of all, this is an amazing picture for somebody like me who, came to Georgia football because of my grandfather, to see Gunner in this picture with his grandfather, Lawrence Stockton, hugging each other right there around, that's just an awesome picture. The headline from Mark Schlabach, Georgia's Gunner Stockton is playing for more than just a win versus Florida. And according to the telling of Schlabach, and all of this comes directly apparently from Gunner Stockton, that Gunner's grandfather Lawrence Stockton died of a heart attack in a parking lot outside the stadium following the Bulldogs' 34-31 loss to the Gators on October 30th, 2010. It was the only game to go into overtime in the 103-year history of this rivalry. So Gunner told Schlabach that he had a heart attack right there at the stadium. Every time we go to Florida, Gunner says, I really want to beat them in Jacksonville. Obviously, in the case of Gunner, what he's saying is, this is a game that meant a lot to my family. We were going to this game way back when I was a kid. Obviously, his grandfather passed away while being there. And the quote that gets a lot of attention is, so I get this comes from Suzanne Fredrickson, also a part of the family, who said about Mr. Stockton that he had said something about Todd Grantham was the defensive coordinator at that time, and then he collapsed. And that quote got a lot of attention. But the main story is that for Gunner Stockton, he's been going to this game since he was a child. And he watched his family put their heart and soul into Georgia football, multiple generations, parents, grandparents, and everything else. We told the story the other day of his grandfather getting arrested at the Georgia-Auburn game in 1986. So you can't be more Georgia than this Georgia team is right now, with an alumnus as head coach, with 2 generations of Bobos, with Gunner Stockton, and multiple generations of his family putting everything they have into rooting for Georgia football, guys who were once committed elsewhere who chose Georgia, and on and on and on you go. It doesn't get more Georgia than this. And I will tell you, that doesn't guarantee anything as it relates to a win. You already know that. But if you're like me, and I hope to a degree you are, it does make rooting for this team more fun. And I do get the sense, and listen, a thrilling win against a team like Ole Miss will do this for you, but I hope it lasts. I do get the sense that people are turning, and by people I mean those of us in what we think of as Dog Nation, people are turning the corner here just a little bit. At the beginning of the season, there was this confusion about what Georgia really was. And can this guy do this? And so, what about that? And complaints about this. And some of those were not unfounded. There were legitimate concerns that perhaps deserve to be expressed. And, people are going to hold on to their opinions. And some of the opinions that people were holding on to, I think, impacted the way they felt about this Georgia team at the beginning of the season. I remember tweeting at a certain point that I don't know how good Georgia is, but I get the sense that Kirby Smart likes this team. I still feel that way. But what I'm starting to get the sense of is that Georgia fans are also starting to recognize a little bit about what caused Kirby to want to like this team as much as he does. And it doesn't mean they're going to win the national championship. It doesn't even mean they're going to win on Saturday. It really doesn't. I think all of that is still very much up for grabs. But it does mean they're fun to root for. And if I had any chance to influence you in any way, I would use that platform to do this. If you're not all in, it's time to be that way. Most of you are. I think more of you are now than were before. It's time to be all in. Not because you know Georgia's going to win tomorrow, the rest of the season, anytime into the future. We don't know any of that. But it means something to this team. The notion of playing for Georgia, putting on them silver britches that aren't quite so silver anymore, playing in a rivalry like this as a true Gator hater, it means something to them. If they win tomorrow, you'll watch the way they celebrate and you'll realize what it means. And I don't know. I'd take that over almost anything. The fact that for someone like me who's been cheering for Georgia football almost before I even knew what it really was, to see a bunch of guys in this situation right now, Gunnar Stockton included, Drew Bobo included, who've been doing the same thing, cheering for Georgia football before they really even truly fully understood what it was they were cheering for. That's what this team is made up of right now. And Kirby Smart at the helm, he's as much of that as anybody ever could be. This is a fun team to root for. And I can't wait to watch a whole bunch of dogs root like crazy for him tomorrow one more time against these lousy, stinking Gators. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. We are so happy that you're with us, whether it's live on video or on demand after that. Radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 Ref, podcast wherever you find them, world-famous DawgNation.com. Just awesome day. We love it. It's a day that always means something to us. We love this rivalry. And we're here and ready to talk to you about it today. By the way, Jeff Sentell will join us in a minute. He's already in Jacksonville, hung out last night at the Jacksonville Bulldog Club. He'll tell you stories about that here coming up in just a little bit, plus some recruiting stuff. Can't wait for that. Also, in the midst of all of this, I am looking forward early tomorrow morning making my way down to Florida, because in Florida right now, it's a little warmer than it is here in Georgia. It's been cold. It was freezing last night. At least it was to me. My blood not quite made for all of that. But the point is, as you get ready for the winter time of year, staying comfortable in your home is a big thing here. How about our friends at Georgia Natural Gas, what they want to do for you, partnering with our folks at Kroger to make this an even better savings opportunity for you. You think about the heating, bill system time of year, you get the heat cranking up. Well, good Georgia Natural Gas helps keep your home toasty and warm all winter long, and a great rate from our friends at Georgia Natural Gas can be yours too. But in addition to that, when you sign up for this terrific rate from Georgia Natural Gas, how about an unbelievable benefit, an extra incentive coming your way, courtesy of the folks at Kroger, who we talk to you about every Friday here on DawgNation Daily. Because right now, when you enroll with Georgia Natural Gas, you're going to get a $100 Kroger gift card as a special incentive for doing just that. A true win-win. This is an awesome thing. So you're cooking some food on the grill this weekend or on the stove, or you just want to stay warm at night when it starts getting cold outside. Georgia Natural Gas helps you with all of that. And our friends from Kroger, who want to give you that $100 gift card for signing up to Georgia Natural Gas, they're going to help you save some money on the grocery bill this time of year. And whether it be Halloween candy or Thanksgiving turkey or coming up for Christmas, boy, a great time to just be doing all of that. So we love it. I want you to find out more online. Go to gng.com. That stands for Georgia Natural Gas. gng.com/Kroger100 for more details on that. That is going to be a great thing. So make sure you check all of that out here today. We love having Kroger as a part of DawgNation Daily, and we love what they're doing right now with our friends from Georgia Natural Gas. Okay, so it's Jeff Sentell coming up here in a little bit. Also, we're going to kind of get into the action on the field with Georgia. And one thing that this week Kirby's pretty honest about, where he wants to see some improvement from Georgia. And obviously it's a thing on Hot Topic with the minds of fans too. So we'll get to that here coming up in just a little bit. Let me also mention this too, that as we roll through, November begins tomorrow. We got a big event with DawgNation coming up the week of the Georgia-Texas game, Thursday, November 13th. We're going to be at Terrapin Brewery. Now, we've been wanting to get back out in the public. It's been a while here in the state of Georgia that we've done a big DawgNation public event. So we've been wanting to do that for a while. And many of you have said, hey, when you do one again, BA, got to do one in the Athens area. Well, that's what we're doing. Had a meeting about this yesterday. It's really coming together. It's going to be an awesome experience. We're calling it DawgNation on Tap. It's Thursday, November 13th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Terrapin Beer Company, the great brewery right there in Athens. And here's how it's going to go down. We're going to have DawgNation folks hanging out and enjoying some great Terrapin beer. By the way, speaking of Terrapin beer, your first beer that night, courtesy of Terrapin, will be complimentary. That's an incredible experience. We'll also do a live Q&A. We'll talk about all the big issues as it relates to Georgia football in pursuit of another return to the college football playoff and maybe a third straight win against the Longhorns. We'll talk about all of that with you. We've got some special guests who are coming too. And if that's not all, how about complimentary food that night provided by Cercheros? We love the fresh Mex of Cercheros. If you've never tried it before, this is a great chance for you to try it. And I promise you, when you do, it's going to become your favorite in this category, this delicious fresh Mex that's served, in this case, catered by the friendly folks of Cercheros. You're going to get a huge level of enjoyment out of all of that. Now, because of the free food and because of the complimentary, the first beer being complimentary and just the space required, because it's a free event to enter, but we are going to ask you to RSVP that you're attending. So go to DawgNation.com/on-tap to do that. DawgNation.com/on-tap to do that. We will encourage you to do that just so we'll know you're coming. We can prepare the food for you and make some space for you. We want to make this a great event. And one more thing. That night at Terrapin Beer Company in Athens, we are also going to give away a pair of tickets to the big game that Saturday in Athens. How about your chance to win a pair of tickets to one of the most anticipated Georgia home games in a very long time, if not ever? You're going to have your chance to win that night at Terrapin Beer Company in Athens. So it's a big event. It's a lot of fun, and we can't wait to see you there for that. Okay, Jeff Sentell coming up. Prior to that, let's go around the Dawghouse, presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. And so let's talk about Georgia on the field in this big rivalry game against Florida. So the storyline has been Georgia having some issues defensively. Some of this has been for the full game. All of this has been to begin the game into the halftime against Auburn, throughout the third quarter against Ole Miss. Certainly the beginning of the game, first quarter, was a disaster against Alabama, that the Georgia defense has just had its issues. I thought it was interesting that this week Kirby Smart made an appearance. Do you know who the Bear Chris Felica is? He has a podcast through Fox called Bear Bets. Kirby was on there. And I thought that Kirby was very candid in talking about the prevalent issues for the Georgia defense, the fact that it's hard to pin down to just one thing, but the open acknowledgement that it does need to get better. This is very candid analysis from Kirby on what he's seeing from his defense right now from the Bear Bets show with the Bear, Chris Felica from Fox Sports.
Yeah, and it's strange because I've been part of defenses that struggled or weren't good in a certain area, and this one's been different because it's hard to pinpoint. We had our most missed tackles in two games, the Alabama and the Ole Miss game. So missed tackles are a huge indicator of explosive plays and not getting off the field. So it's like whatever the issue is, it rears its head game to game. Auburn, I would say it was quarterback run in the first half. Ole Miss, it was effectively a 2nd down and 10 problem because we got them to 2nd and long a lot, but we didn't get them to 3rd and long any. And it's like, what's going on? Like, how can you get teams to 2nd and 10? So you won 1 down, but the next thing you know, they're not in 3rd and long. They're in 3rd and short, or they're converting 2nd and 10s to 1st down. So we got to figure out what it is. It's not fun to be a part of, but when they've had to stop people and we've gone out and needed stops, they've been able to do it. We just haven't done it with any consistency. So I feel good about the group we have. I think we got good, talented players. Just haven't been able to play at the level that we have in the past. And that starts with rushing the passer, giving up free access, getting off the field on third down. I mean, it's just been tough, and we haven't had as many third and longs as we're used to.
So I think that's really candid analysis from Kirby Smart. And I think the broad takeaway is that Kirby's saying we have good players who've occasionally played badly. And if you're trying to diagnose what the issue with the Georgia defense, that's what Kirby Smart seems to think that it is. Now, your mileage may vary. You may have a slightly different opinion. But Kirby's saying, we think we have good players. They've occasionally played badly. A lot of that has been to begin the game so far this season. That's what Kirby Smart says. He also acknowledges, and this is not, the phrase, you sometimes see this on the internet, there's no gaslighting here from Kirby Smart. There's no attempt to tell you something that you know is not true and have you be confused of whether or not Kirby actually believes that. Kirby's not gaslighting you here. Kirby says it's not fun when you see the defense have as many struggles as it has, especially to begin the game. Kirby openly acknowledging that the frustrations that sometimes fans feel, that Kirby would say, yeah, I feel the same way. It's not fun when you see them go through this. Also, in that conversation, we don't have time to play the entire thing. You can go check out Bear Bets on a podcast platform if you want to hear it. Smart said, we've also got to get better. And I think that's an important point to consider. I mentioned this on a show earlier this week, that Georgia might be able to keep doing what it's done and beat Florida tomorrow. Play good defense at the exact right time, something that Smart also acknowledged in the clip we played a moment ago. Showing up when you really need to, that might be enough to beat Florida. But this razor's edge, thin margin, everything is a nail biter, everything's a comeback, everything is, almost like me when I was in college, just at the last possible minute, cramming and getting a passing grade. That's not going to work for the rest of the season if Georgia's really a championship contender. If Georgia's going to contend for a national championship, certainly, or something else, SEC championship, deep run in the playoff, however you want to define success, they're probably going to have to demonstrate some margin at some point. That's what a good team does. There's no real, use case, proof of concept for, boy, a team just marched through an entire season, winning every game by 2 and 3 points, single digits. Eventually you are going to build some comfort into your final margin of victory if you really are a championship contender. And in November, we may see Georgia do it. As I told you yesterday, they have technically covered their last 3 games, so maybe they're in the process of doing that right now. But it's Smart openly acknowledging that they need to get better. Now, as a way of spinning this towards something positive before we wrap it up, there is also maybe quietly some evidence that things are getting a little bit better. You can decide for yourself how much stock you put in this, but think about a position group for Georgia that's been among the most maligned this season. That'd be the defensive secondary, where you give up big, yards and point totals to Tennessee. You had your issues on third down against Alabama. Obviously, for 3 quarters, Ole Miss got everything that it wanted, including at times what a lot of Georgia fans thought was way too soft coverage that Ole Miss was just standing there and picking apart. That, leads to some frustration. But even within that group, there may be some evidence that quietly things are getting a little bit better. Let me show you this from Pro Football Focus. There's a guy named Cam Meller who works for them, who, tabulates numbers, things like that. This stat may surprise you a little bit, but it is nonetheless interesting to me. According to Meller from Pro Football Focus, the FBS cornerbacks who've allowed the lowest catch rate thus far this season based on percentages of pass coverage that have resulted in catches, Alice Robinson's on this list in the top 10. He's not at the very top of the top 10, but only 35.3% of Robinson's plays in pass coverage thus far this year have resulted in receptions. That puts him right there in the category of the very best, at least based on this statistic. Now, once again, you can decide for yourself how much that matters to you, but it is a statistic that perhaps encourages you to believe that even for a position group that needs to be a little bit better, there is some evidence as Robinson gets more experience, as DeMello Jones gets that, as Georgia figures out what it wants to do at safety after the injury to Kyron Jones, that some of this is happening. And tomorrow against Florida provides a really big opportunity for them. If Georgia can go into this game, win by a couple of touchdowns, that to me is a pretty big statement. If they don't, and they win it by even a skinny little point, I'll be as happy as somebody can be. But if they can play a little better defensively, and maybe it's for a full 4 quarters, then maybe some of that improvement that Kirby Smart says he wants to see in this Georgia defense, maybe that'll be an indication that that is in the process of taking place. And that is around the Dawghouse, presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. We talk about Zagoria Law each week because I love what they do for our audience. Let's face it, you don't want to be bitten by a dog, and it almost seems like a weird thing. Well, whoever gets bitten by a dog. But look at the stats, y'all. This happens across our state, in our city, here in Atlanta, where I broadcast from, all the time. There are news reports, and a lot of this is really scary. And it's not always dog bites. It can be just in a park or something like that, or in a neighborhood. You get knocked down by a dog, you can break an arm, especially if it's a younger child or an older person. These things can be really serious. And because of the severity of these situations, we believe that if this impacts you or somebody you love, it's no different than any other personal injury situation. You might deserve some compensation for it. Pain and suffering, medical bills, things like that. And just like any other aspect of personal injury law, you want to work with an expert in this particular field. That's what Zagoria Law is. They literally wrote the book on how to win these types of cases. That's what they do. Put that knowledge to work for you to get you the compensation you deserve if you've been harmed by a dog, if someone you love has that situation. Negligence on the part of the owner of that dog is obviously a serious situation, and Zagoria Law wants to treat your situation with the care that it deserves. So give them a call, 833-GA-DOGBITE, dog spelled D-O-G, 833-GA-DOGBITE, or online, ZagoriaLaw.com, Z-A-G-O-R-I-A, ZagoriaLaw.com for more on that today. All right, before we're done, there is a topic out there that impacts a lot of Georgia fans, and I don't know anybody in the media is talking nearly enough about it. We'll correct that before we're done, but for now, Georgia recruiting, the scene in Jacksonville, and everything else. Let's talk to Jeff Sentell here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Let us say hello to Jeff Sentell, who is already in Jacksonville. Hung out last night with the Bulldog Club of Jacksonville. Some of my favorite people. I'm always proud of that. Boy, beautiful scenery there. I said it earlier, Jeff, it's been cold in Georgia. I'm ready to get down to Florida because the weather looks much better there than it has been here. Been kind of a crummy week on the weather front. So go ahead and set the scene for me. We'll do a Brent Musburger. You are looking live in Jacksonville right now. What's it like down there on the First Coast, and are Georgia fans getting ready for this cocktail party?
Brandon, good morning, sir. The locals, love the locals here in Jacksonville. They have promised us 74 degrees-ish for kickoff. Now, I know a lot of our friends in St. Simons, Brandon, all those dogs that are down there and all those condominiums.
Yes, sir.
Mullet Bay, Frat Beach, getting their favorite barbecue, finding that Airstream trailer with all the merch in it. They're busy, man. I know some guys that play golf, and it was kind of like British Open conditions yesterday playing golf. Very, very windy, very cold, but I'm sitting here on the banks of the river we all know so well, Brandon. Got some sun in our eyes. Otherwise, I'd let you see the shot. And here's a couple things. Dog fans, you will not believe how different Jacksonville's footprint looks around the stadium. Of course, everybody knows 2-year hibernation, 2028, it comes back. Brandon, by then, I don't know if we'll even recognize the city blocks around the stadium. They want to do it kind of like Truist Park style in the Battery. Brandon, there is a Four Seasons hotel going up, glassy windows, facades, and everything. Maybe, I would say, maybe a Jared Curtis spiral or two away from the 50-yard line at Everbank Stadium.
I mean, you're talking about getting a glow up. I don't know that I've ever thought of Jacksonville, all due respect, as a Four Seasons kind of town necessarily. I guess new stadium, fancy new hotel. This is quite a glow up for a city that's known for its fun on this particular weekend, but not exactly, once again, just being honest, the most cosmopolitan of locations around the stadium necessarily, typically speaking.
They want to go metropolitan, Brandon. They want to go bougie. I mean, it's not just the Andrew Jackson statue anymore, or the great people at the Georgia Bulldog Club of Jacksonville. You mentioned that. I got to give some thanks to those folks. They always take great care of us, Dog Nation people. I got to actually speak yesterday on the docket, and Aaron Murray of all people was coming up right behind me. So that's like on the tee box, Brandon, and the next guy behind you is going to stripe at about 350 down the middle. So you got to make sure you keep the train on its course. There was a neat little diatribe about, is it what's that coming down the track or who's that coming down the track evolved throughout the night. It was a really good time.
So I want to ask you a couple of questions about this. And our theme this week is this Georgia team has never been more Georgia than it is right now. This is Georgia on steroids. And one example of that is Drew Bobo this week saying that his favorite Halloween costume as a kid was when he dressed up like Aaron Murray. Did Murray get asked about, and did it come up the fact that Drew Bobo, at least once, maybe a couple of times, dressed as Aaron Murray for Halloween?
It didn't come up, but the age of Aaron Murray came up because he was getting a lot of questions about, does he want to coach one day? And Aaron had a nice little bit where he asked his wife, he said, hey, can I do it? He says, I know I can be a head coach in 10 years and then we'll get about $60 million no matter what happens. And through the course of that, he shared some advice he got from Mike Bobo and his wife, because he remembers when Bobo was a coordinator at Georgia, he had a little bit more hair. And he had 5 young kids. I believe he had 5 under 5. And Mike Bobo's wife told him, he's like, Aaron, you don't want to do this. And now it's funny, all those kids are grown up, especially Drew Bobo playing in his game tomorrow.
Well, we were talking about this along those lines, and I know that you had the picture shared with you too of us at the cocktail party going like 8 years ago. It was one of the first Gator Hater events we ever did, hanging out and doing a meet and greet on that particular Friday night. And my gosh, 8 years ago, I look so much younger. I guess we all do. It's 8 years after all. But, sometimes you're like, has doing this job, talking Georgia football, aged me this much? Because it's actually been a pretty fun run here. I love the job. Georgia's been winning. But somehow, man, I have added a lot of gray hairs in 8 years.
And it shouldn't be because of your football team, Brandon.
It should not be.
Eddie giving you a lot of drama.
It's my kids.
Here's one stat, Brandon, I pulled out because reporters are known to look up stats and provide perspective, right? I wanted to see how golden this era was for Kirby Smart. And I said, you know what? It just seems like every year Kirby comes down with the Dogs to Jacksonville, and they're either unbeaten or have just one loss. So I looked up, I went all the way back to 1915. I sifted through the archives. I know that sounds very ominous. Georgia has been down in Jacksonville with 1 loss or 0 losses, Brandon, 50 times. This weekend will be 51. Kirby has brought the Dogs down there under those circumstances already 9 times, 9 straight years, Brandon. They've been playing this game since 1915. They've played it in Gainesville, Florida, Savannah, Georgia, of all places. They played it in Tampa before. They're going to play it in lots of other places besides Jacksonville, Athens. I think that is startling, Brandon, how that's roughly, for all the math majors out there, that's 16% of the time Georgia has been unbeaten or have 1 loss coming into this game, the cocktail party. And Kirby Smart has done it 9 out of those 36 times, and he's done it 9 straight years. Oh, also a fun little fact, Georgia is 36-14 and 1 tie in those instances when they've came down to Jacksonville, with a really good team.
No, I think that's really interesting. I want to ask you a couple of recruiting questions. Let me squeeze in one more thing, though. We talked about the amazing Mark Schlabach story, ESPN.com by Gunnar Stockton. And we have already done a Gunnar grandfather story once this season because he got arrested at the Georgia-Auburn game in 1986. And there was also a really remarkable, tale of, just how deep Gunnar's roots run with this. And I'm sure, incredibly sad story at the time of Lawrence Stockton, his grandfather, having a heart attack at the Georgia-Florida game in 2010. And there's obviously some colorful aspects to that story that I think that people have really noticed. But beyond that, Jeff, Georgia's got a quarterback whose parents and multiple generations just run deep in the state of Georgia. That means something to me. The Schlabach story at ESPN.com is a wild one. People should read it. But to know that Stockton's family runs as deep as it does, I don't know. I just think that, to me, that impacts the way that you view the Georgia quarterback. Putting on that uniform, that big G on the side of his head, boy, it clearly means something to him. And he certainly was more than happy to tell Mark Schlabach about that.
Brandon, I think probably we would say 2 things. Number one, Brendan, he's only started 10 games. Reminder, right? He's only started 9 games, maybe. Played in 10 as the Georgia QB1, which is kind of crazy to think about. Like, you're supposed to be getting better. You're supposed to be trying to feel out the nuances, getting your timing right. And Gunner is, so far to this point, when you add in the 10 touchdowns, just 1 pick, 7 scores on the ground, he's really the face of the program. And it's a wonderful, it's a charming, it's a very, very much on book archetype for your Georgia quarterback. There were comments made on social media this week about Nate Frazier said he would die playing for Gunner Stockton because he's a guy that gives you everything he's got on the line. And Brandon, this is another thing. You bring up these grandfather stories. I mean, this is how thick the Gunner Stockton legend is going. This is like the 4th or 5th, like matriarchal story we have about Gunner Stockton and grandparents, grandparents on both sides, grandparents that were affected by 3rd and Grantham a little bit too much, man. It shows you Gunner is a man of the people. People tell me all the time, they say when we talk about recruiting, they're like, okay, about this boy in Nashville, we do like our quarterbacks from Georgia. Georgia quarterbacks seem to work from Georgia with the Georgia Bulldogs. So, I mean, he really is, Brandon. I think everybody that knows him very well is proud of him. Everybody that I've covered and followed and learned about Gunner for the last 2 or 3 or 4 years have told me they knew this was going to happen, Brandon. It goes back to, I remember talking to George Bobo when I was covering Gunner as a recruit. He told me these stories. Gunner was like 3rd grade, 4th grade, Brandon, and he was already throwing a football 35 yards in the air. He did it at Snyder Stadium there in Tiger, Georgia at Raven County. Try this with your folks at home. You got 3rd graders or 4th graders at home. See if they can throw it 35 yards straight down the line on a football field. That's some great arm strength, and that kind of adds to the legend of Gunner Stockton.
So I will tell you that when it comes to the ESPN story, I've almost had a little bit of a hard time talking about it because a lot of people are making a big deal about the Grantham part of this, and that essentially his last words were some apparently some criticism of then Georgia defensive coordinator Todd Grantham. But still, Mr. Stockton passing away, which even if it's 15 years ago, is an incredibly sad thing. But man, that as stories go, that's about as Georgia as it gets.
I mean, you've got one grandfather at the cocktail party.
Yeah.
After an overtime loss, you've got another grandfather on the plane, the loveliest village in Jordan-Hare Stadium. I mean, Brandon, these are your people, right? These are our people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The diehard dog fans, the ones that bark, the ones that have Georgia man caves, the ones that have every copy of every Georgia game ever still on DVD now or Blu-ray, or they've got it uploaded onto their hard drives or whatever. I mean, this is a purebred Georgia family, and their quarterback, their favored son, so to speak, leading the Dogs into the cocktail party this weekend.
So let me do 2 quick recruiting things. We can make these both quick because I hope you have a great day coming up here. Enjoying that time there on the water. I hope you get a chance to do that. Starting with this, the Jerry Curtis thing, we always talked about it that a bunch going into last weekend, the visit to Vanderbilt. This ultimately seemed to be, as it was described prior to, and essentially confirmed on the other side of that this was a visit. Maybe you describe it as a favor to Vanderbilt or as a favor to those who went with him. It was clearly a situation where, Curtis wanted to do a solid for Vanderbilt by being there, but you don't get, at least based on the reporting that's out there now, and probably the realization that a lot of this was maybe over-amplified to begin with, you don't get the sense that Vanderbilt made any real headway towards convincing Curtis to reconsider his Georgia pledge. This seems to be a thing that happened, but ultimately fairly inconsequential. That's your read on it, right?
Yeah, Brandon, we'll have a piece that goes up today that kind of shares a week after what's going. Are there any intense negotiations? Is there any flip talk? Is numbers being kind of shared? One little teaser about that piece, Brandon, is I did some reporting on the subject this week, and yes, his head coach was a former quarterback and defensive back at Vanderbilt. Yes, it was game day. All of that stuff. I thought it was very interesting, Brandon. And I know this is a market that loves their headlines and they love their social media pics, and they love, I think it went viral of him sitting in the stadium watching. Well, one of the things that came out of that, Brandon, was Jared Curtis bought a ticket to this game. He wasn't a hosted recruit. He didn't want to be around a lot of that as a hosted recruit. One of his teammates, one of the very few Power Four players on his team at Nashville Christian, who, by the way, has won 19 in a row, is facing a big-time rival nemesis in the region championship game tonight that's beaten Nashville Christian a couple times in Jared Curtis's career. He wanted to see Vanderbilt. He was invited to see Vanderbilt. Jared wanted to go with him. Some members of the coaching staff went with him. But, this whole thing about full court press and pushed, it tastes a little bit different in your mouth when you know that he bought his own ticket. He wasn't sitting in the recruiting stands. He wasn't up and down the sidelines watching Vanderbilt warm up per se, not getting wooed. I think that means something to this story. And, the other aspect of this, Brandon, this is what I've said from the jump. He's already had his rethinking. He's already had his redecision. He's already had his chances to get more money from places like Oregon, places like South Carolina that have a better infrastructure situation than a Vanderbilt per se. And, Vanderbilt's got a team I feel that's going to turn over, and they're going to be transfer portal heavy if they want to stick around. And I think the smartest thing Vanderbilt can do right now is re-sign Clark Lee in this SEC coaching environment rather than try to flip Jared Curtis right now, because that bodes to long-term future. But again, Nashville Christian, Jared Curtis has to play hero ball almost every week for them to win big games and to win state championships and to beat these teams that they're facing that are 3 times bigger than them in classification. Brandon, I don't think Jared Curtis wants to be the only, future NFL first rounder prospect on his football team in college. I don't think he wants to be that guy that, rises above all the odds. I think he wants to be on the side of, I guess, the Emperor and Darth Vader and the evil Galactic Empire, the team that is supposed to crush everyone. And also they have one of the best players in the country at quarterback. I think that's what Jared wants, and he's wanted to do this at a place like Georgia 2 times now.
So let me finish with this, and we can make this short because you may not have much to say about it, and that's fine if you don't. Obviously, I get a chance to do high school football every Friday night. We got a great game tonight between Milton and Roswell. I'm really looking forward to it. But because I do these games on Atlanta News First, I do have a little bit of a bias for players that I see in person. And a guy that I saw in person earlier this season, I really liked. Blake Stewart, the then Clemson commit. I guess he's committed to them as a safety. He's a two-way player in high school. I think Stewart's a really impressive athlete, and like a lot of players from the Clemson class recently, he is now decommitted. As a safety prospect, any chance that Georgia might take a look at Blake Stewart, you think?
Yes, sir. I think so. They're always looking for great football players, Brandon, and guys that kind of can fit that niche. And, the niche is he's a really great, versatile player. He's an asset in the run game. He's an asset in the kick game. Some people might call it duplication or resources because he sounds a lot like Tyreek Green, the talented commitment at Buford High. But Georgia right now, I think it looks at its secondary and they're like, we don't have enough guys, especially guys that can play safety, that can come down and play a nickel corner, guys that can match up in space, guys that can fly to the ball and be physical. Brandon Stewart is very, very good. And he's somebody that anybody in the state of Georgia, anybody in the country would love to have. And you get a rare Dabo decommit here. One of the things, though, and it's funny how this Vanderbilt world soap opera keeps spinning, is Stewart, according to my information, he was at Vanderbilt last weekend, and Vanderbilt's involved. Miami's involved. Georgia's a school. It's one of those things, Brandon. We'll know it gets real with Blake Stewart when he takes a visit. He takes an official visit to Georgia, perhaps for Texas later this year. That's when we're going to know it's serious, because we can't help. I feel like this is a weird recruiting cycle where we have to look at the Georgia commits, which now stand 29 strong, and we go, is that guy going to be able to make it? Is that guy going to be able to get through some off-the-field troubles in order to sign with the Bulldogs? Is that guy going to end up signing when he's been committed for so long? I think you're going to have some wiggle here at the very end with Georgia and a couple of names.
Jeff, great stuff. Can't wait to see you in Jacksonville. We'll obviously have you a part of our game day coverage, including with me on the field after the game's over for the DawgNation postgame show, and of course with Kaylee prior to that game day pregame coming up at 1:30 p.m. tomorrow. Just one of our favorite days of the year. I know it means a lot to you. It means a lot to me there as well. I got my shirt on today to signify that. Looking forward to some fun this weekend. Jeff, hope you have plenty of that here today too, and we'll see you again next week at the same time for DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger.
Brandon, have a great call tonight. I also must express this on the air. Several members of the Bulldog Club said, "How's BA doing?
Good.
How's that voice hanging in there?"
I
I said, "Man,
appreciate
he's
that.
hunkering down. He's chopping wood. He's just trying to, and everybody's playing hurt at this point. I wish you was great call tonight. Wish everybody a safe trip down. I can smell the aroma of the Maxwell House coffee plant. You know what I'm talking about?
I do for sure.
If you know, you know. Can't wait to see everybody in Jacksonville on Saturday. It will be another great one. We won't get one for the next 2 or 3 years, so we better soak it all up.
Looking forward to it, Jeff. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
During the show, I have what's known as a rundown. The rundown lets me know the advertisers that we need to pay due deference to during the program. As you can see if you're watching on video, I mostly use mine to doodle on. Clearly, I missed a mark there a moment ago because while Jeff was on, I was supposed to remind you, and I'll do this before we do our SEC through, that speaking of rivalry games for Georgia, you've also got one, not just tomorrow against Florida, neutral side, but the end of the season, neutral side as well when it comes to the one we used to think of as clean old-fashioned 8 for this year, a little bit of a different name, but the same intensity as Georgia gets ready to play Georgia Tech Black Friday afternoon at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. This needs to be a Georgia takeover. We think the Georgia fans are going to be in full spirit tomorrow in Jacksonville, but it's got to be the same way on that day after Thanksgiving. You can't let that turkey hangover or anything like that keep you from being there and being loud and taking that place over. Tech's got dreams of a special season, but to borrow a phrase that Les Miles once made famous, we're going to make Mercedes-Benz Stadium the place that dreams go to die for Georgia Tech, but you got to be in the place for that to happen. In the building, we need you there. Mercedes-BenzStadium.com/events to get your tickets for that. Mercedes-BenzStadium.com/events to get your tickets for that. That is going to be okay. We have, oh my gosh, we have breaking news in the show here right now. We'll see you for Black Friday for Georgia and Georgia Tech. Let's get ready to now go back to Jeff Sentell because we have breaking news on the show. As the day before the Georgia-Florida game, the Georgia Bulldogs have just landed a commit. Jeff Sentell, this is exciting, completely unplanned. I love the live experience here. I appreciate the fact that you would share this with us because I know this provides extra work for you, but we're thrilled to have you. The floor is now yours.
Brandon, how do you feel about a 6'8" plus 325-pound, 21-year-old offensive tackle? It's a flip. It's a flip Friday. Georgia has just gotten the flip of recent junior college offensive tackle Jermaine Big Baby. So there's another big baby on Georgia's roster next year, most likely. Jermaine Mitchell, he's the number one offensive tackle, number one offensive line prospect. He's in Copia Lincoln, I believe, Community College. He was previously committed to Mississippi State. No longer. He took his official visit to Georgia for the Ole Miss game. That was some big news. You kind of heard it was rumbling. You kind of heard that was kind of coming down the tracks. But Georgia just adds another offensive line commitment. Brandon, this guy looks like a tackle, although he's been rated as both. But it's another offensive lineman that moves Georgia now to 5 offensive linemen in this class. Another tackle type in this class. And Brandon, this is one that's probably going to play sooner rather than later because he's already, the Louisiana native, has already had a couple seasons outside of high school playing junior college ball.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it sounds like he's an offensive tackle prospect. Is that correct?
Yeah, he is. But he's been rated as both. I mean, Brandon, in this world right now, we saw Juan Gaston playing guard for Georgia earlier this year. So he can kind of do both, but kind of the prototype. Georgia's got to kind of look at it, and they're going to go, okay, think about this for a second. Ernest Green III, his future. What about Monroe Freeling?
Yeah.
They need a lot more tackle bodies, and really the only guy in this class right now is Ekene Ogboko, the brother of Nnamdi Ogboko, the redshirt freshman defensive lineman. Committed as like a pure tackle type guy. So Stacey Searles needs some more horses, needs some more big bodies. And again, Brandon, that room, I believe this becomes the 8th guy in the room now that is 6'7" or taller on Georgia's offensive line.
So let me squeeze in one more thing, then we'll let you get on to your coverage of this. So obviously we love Georgia recruiting, but when you get into the season, you, at least for someone like me, you probably lose touch just a little bit with the daily tick-tock of the ongoing proceedings. It certainly seems like, to my eyes, that Georgia has felt very done at most position groups, but the flurry of activity that we've seen, whether it be offers or kicking the tires on so-and-so, and there have been a few of these that come up, a lot of this has been along the offensive line, where Georgia, more so than any other position, seem to be doing late work in this class at offensive line. And as you said, specifically maybe at offensive tackle because of the uncertainty of what it might be facing. Is that the sense that you've gotten as well? And is that a correct readout on what the news cycle has been over the course of the last couple of months for Georgia on the recruiting front?
I think it looks like a lot of that. It's kind of like a gumbo, Brandon. There's a little bit of, the coaching carousel, some very good players, prospects on the Penn State roster, for example, have opened up. Georgia's going to host one of their offensive line commitments later this year as well for an official. But, Georgia kind of believes, look at the way they're winning ball games, Brandon, right now. It's really with the offensive line. It's really with the run game, being efficient in the run game, having Gunner play in favorable down and distance situations, having Bobo call in those favorable situations for his offense as well. And really what they also believe in this, Brand, they also believe in that senior year eval where the guys just play better their senior year, and they may be a lot better than their junior tape. I like to call it they swallow the grow up pill, where they just get a lot better. Maybe they lose some weight. Maybe they dedicate themselves in the offseason with a trainer, and the great football finally comes out of them where maybe they've been misfiring for a few years. And there's a lot of guys like that, and it really helps when you're 6'7" or 6'8" and you're doing things like that. This is a guy from the state of Louisiana. He had to go to junior college football. And now Georgia, after he'd been committed to Mississippi State for a pretty good bit, Brandon, now Georgia pulls the flip. I guess we can, like we said, we can call it a flip Friday, flipping off Mississippi State, about to play them in another week from now as well, as we all think about that Starkville trip. But Georgia's offensive line room gets a little bit bigger, gets a little bit deeper, gets a little bit older now for the 2026 season.
All right, so before we let you go, for those who may be just joining us on video or just kind of check down the podcast, restate the news here. Georgia getting a commitment, a flip from Mississippi State. Restate the news for us one more time, if you don't mind.
Jermaine Mitchell, nicknamed Big Baby, 6'8 plus, about 320 plus. Looked very chummy, Brandon, up and down the sidelines for the Ole Miss game. He was an official visitor for that game, and you kind of heard coming out of that something was going to happen, Brandon. We'll have images of his visit. We'll have images of his commitment in his commitment story. But, Brandon, he was in the front row. He's feeling very happy. He had one of those grinning from ear to ear type looks. Takes his official. Takes about 2 weeks. I didn't think it would take this long. He is the number 2 guy on the Before the Hedges top targets list remaining for 2026. Brandon, that moves Georgia back up to 30 commitments in this class. Jermaine, Big Baby. So there's going to be a Big Baby haul on defense, and now there'll be a Big Baby on offense. Georgia just got a little bit bigger and a little bit better today up front.
Great stuff, Jeff. Thanks so much for popping in and telling us about that. That's awesome breaking news. I think good for UGA. We appreciate your coverage, and we'll talk to you soon.
See you, Brandon. On with the show.
Thank you very much. So good stuff there from Jeff Sentell. Let me just say this real quick, that I am a very big fan, at least potentially, of the notion of the junior college offensive lineman, the guy that's ready to come in and perhaps play right away, from the standpoint that, I mean, what Georgia's done this year with Dontrell Glover and Juan Gaston, that is a moonshot. That is not the kind of thing that's going to happen on a regular basis. 2 guys that have essentially been not just among Georgia's best offensive linemen, really they're playing at a very high clip compared to the rest of the SEC as guys who just arrived on campus. That's not going to happen very much. It takes a little bit of age on you, usually, if you want to be a good offensive lineman. And what we sometimes think of as the easy button, you just go out there and push this. With the transfer portal, y'all, typically speaking, the one position that you don't find in the transfer portal is offensive tackles. There's even more defensive linemen sometimes than there are offensive linemen, just for whatever reason. I mean, the transfer portal, for the most part, is not producing on a yearly basis the large number of elite players that I think a lot of programs were hoping it might. Just broadly speaking, that's true. That's specifically true for the most part when it comes to the offensive line. As Jeff alluded to, because of the fact that there are so many coaching firings with programs that had some talent, maybe there'll be more offensive line talent in the transfer portal this year than there typically is. But the one place where the pickings are usually really slim in the transfer portal are for offensive linemen, offensive tackles in particular. So if you want those in your program, if you want ready-made players in your program, you're not usually getting tackles in the transfer portal. That's just not typically the kind of thing you can do. Can you do a little better when it comes to a JUCO type prospect? You might be able to. A big guy who's 21 years old, he might be ready to come in and help you. That's a pretty interesting situation. Now, we're still going to do our SEC through. Before we do, though, let me also give a shout out to our friends at Academy Sports and Outdoors. You know, you've heard me mention we got Halloween today, and you got Thanksgiving coming up. And y'all, it's not too soon to start thinking about Christmas season here, too. And Academy Sports and Outdoors has an incredible array of things for you this upcoming Christmas, including the Magellan Outdoor Christmas Market Collection. That's only going to be there at Academy Sports and Outdoors. So when you need stuff for the parties you're going to be having and you know the stuff that you're going to be wearing, all of that really fun stuff, Academy Sports and Outdoors has got you there for that. When you look at the entire collection, it's matching pajamas, it's the holiday print fishing stuff that you love, those fishing shirts. That's a lot of fun. Plus, you got the new Mossy Oak Snowdrift camo styles and so much more. It's the kind of thing that you think of when you think of Academy Sports and Outdoors. It's the kind of thing that makes Christmas fun with your own personal style mixed in with all of that. We love that. And don't forget, if you need something fast from Academy Sports and Outdoors, you can also get it DoorDash sent right to you, which is a pretty amazing thing to think about. You can also shop what now is probably the old-fashioned way online at academy.com. So check all that out, academy.com for that. And if you want that Magellan Outdoors Christmas Market Collection, you can only find that at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Okay, we don't need music. We will do a little bit of an SEC through here for you right now, though. I'm talking about what's going to go down here this particular weekend. Let me squeeze in this real quick, and I'll give you a couple of thoughts on the games. So one of the things I sometimes get a little concerned about when we as media, and I'm not really a reporter, but I am still media, most of you know the difference on that, when we have a blind spot. And this is something that I think leading into this weekend's games, which I think are going to be really fun, that we have a little bit of a blind spot on because it affects the average media person a little less than it affects the average fan. I get the sense, just from people that I'm talking to in my daily life right now, that the biggest story in the world right now from a football fan standpoint is what's going on between the Disney family of networks and YouTube TV. And it's another one of these standoffs over carriage fees and rights holder money and price per subscription that we see happen with TV providers. And, you know, usually it's ESPN because that's obviously the most coveted product when it comes to that thing. We see this happen all the time. And for those of you who are impacted by this, and I don't know the exact numbers for just Georgia fans alone, but I do know how much YouTube TV has grown as a provider, and so it's going to be a lot of you. Boy, I hope this gets rectified. I hope this gets cleared up, and I really feel sorry for you in many ways because a lot of people, I think, were originally sold the idea that YouTube TV was some sort of clever hack to allow you to cut the cord, and you can get rid of your old TV provider, and you have this new thing, and YouTube TV is totally different. And it was much cheaper, I think you were led to believe. And the truth is, I don't know how much any of these services cost, but it certainly seems like as time goes on, what you're discovering is, whether it be price increases or standoffs over carriage fees, things like that, that ultimately this is proving to be almost just like a cable company, like anything else has ever proven to be. And I think for a lot of people, that's probably pretty frustrating. Once again, I won't pretend to know what's what and who's right and who's wrong. I'm like most of you. I don't really care. I just want the games to be on. I happen to have a different TV provider, so this doesn't impact me personally. But if it does impact you, it's a huge deal. I don't really have a solution to the problem other than just pointing out that, boy, it impacts a lot of people. It's incredibly frustrating because, you know, the ESPN people want to say it's so-and-so's fault, and the I guess the YouTube folks in this case want to say it's greedy ESPN, it's their fault. Ultimately, nobody really cares, and I don't think really anybody believes any of those arguments. It's just one of those things of figure it out and get me my games back on TV. So if you're impacted by this, I hope it gets figured out. I know these types of things are frustrating because they happen all the time, it seems like. So if you're impacted by this, I am certainly sorry about that. Now, as we do our SEC through, let me also give you a couple of thoughts on the games here for this weekend. So I mentioned the Vanderbilt-Texas game. You know, right now we've seen Texas is about a 2.5 point favorite, depending on when you've looked. This is one of those interesting games that if you care about point spreads, there has been two-way action on this game. The reason why you can tell is because it opened with Texas as a favorite. You saw a pretty big movement initially right out of the gate on Vanderbilt. And since then, you've seen a buyback in the direction of Texas. You can follow the line movement and have a general idea about how the money's pouring in on this. So this week, you've seen action on both sides. I believe that tomorrow's going to be a big day for Texas. I believe even though he's been listed as questionable and in, concussion protocol, I do believe Arch Manning's going to play, and I do believe that Texas is going to win this game. They're off next week. That'll preserve Georgia-Texas coming up, a couple of weeks after that, as just a massive, massive game with playoff implications, at least close to what we thought it would be. This is still going to be a very big game coming up in Athens. I made reference this week to, the situation in Vanderbilt. Jeff Sentell was talking about the Jared Curtis story this week. Interesting nugget in the national write-up that On3 had of this, which is that Curtis is as committed to Georgia as ever, but there's this small blurb added into the story that, hey, if Clark Lee could get a long-term contract, that might help. And that's one of those weird things that's added in that seem to be some sort of service to somebody. And I won't pretend to know exactly how that comes together, but I will say this, that if Vandy is fishing for the wouldn't it be great if our coach got the long-term extension type thing after a visit from a guy like Jared Curtis, it would lead me to believe they don't think they're winning on Saturday. And with some pretty tough games still coming up, maybe they also don't think when it's all said and done they make the college football playoff either. They're a good team, and they've had, to this point, a great season, especially by Vanderbilt standards. Of course that's the case. But we are now entering November, high altitude for sure. I don't like Vandy on Saturday against Texas. And for as disappointing as Texas has been, they are still the more substantial team in this matchup. They're also playing at home. Believe it or not, it's Texas's first SEC Arkansas. You got interim coach for Arkansas. You got Mississippi State. Almost beat Texas. Almost beat Florida. Who wants to play in this particular game? I think the motivation is probably still with Mississippi State, more so than it is with Arkansas. Slowly but surely, whatever magic Arkansas thought it had with the interim coach and Bobby Petrino, they played good teams close. Last week, they let a big lead slip away against Auburn. My guess is if you want to use a word like quit, the quit factor is a little higher for Arkansas than it is for Mississippi State. I like the Bulldogs this weekend. I don't, however, think that South Carolina has quit on the season yet. They're not winning, but they are still competitive. They're playing close. And I think against Ole Miss on Saturday, they play this one close too. Ole Miss probably wins, but sometimes when you come back home after a long stretch of being away, and Ole Miss has played 2 straight road games, there's a little bit of an exhale factor. I could see Ole Miss exhaling just a bit. I don't think that South Carolina's quit on the season, despite the fact, boy, they had a heartbreaking loss to Alabama last week. I think they hold on and fight just enough to keep this one inside what's a pretty big number. 12.5 is where we have it. I think that Auburn's still playing harder than Kentucky is. I like Auburn at home. And there is a huge game in the SEC that's essentially rightly being called a playoff elimination game. It's Tennessee-Oklahoma. It is very much worth your time. I think overall, Tennessee is probably still a little better than they're being given credit for. But boy, they got a big problem that they can't seem to figure out too, and I think that could impact the game. Our official pick on this, as well as the rest of our DawgNation colleagues, will come up later on video for DawgNation Daily as a part of our R.S. Andrews cooldown. But as we wrap up the SEC through, let me just say for now, this is definitely a game worth watching. And if you want our official pick on that, I will invite you to check out the video broadcast and our R.S. Andrews cooldown when it's all said and done. For now, we'll make that your SEC through. And by the way, speaking of getting ready for a big game day, of course, our friends at Cercheros want to help you do just that. Game day watching at the house, you're making your own cocktail party at home. The fresh mix of Cercheros is, of course, a great way to go on that. Or perhaps you're getting ready to head down to Jacksonville tomorrow, stopping by your local Cercheros to stock up. Hey, maybe it's just sort of chomping on some chips and queso or guac while you're driving down the road. That's a pretty good idea. I don't think I haven't done that before. Or maybe it's just today stopping in to get a great lunch. It's going to be freshly prepared just for you. They'll grill your veggies if you want them to. They'll take great care to make sure your food tastes exactly the way that it's supposed to taste. That is what Cercheros is all about. So you can find out more online, including where one of their 40 locations are close to you, online at Cercheros.com. Surcheros, Cercheros.com for more on that today. And as we wrap up, we'll do a golden shoe. Obviously, the golden shoe and so much of what we do around here initially designed to make fun of Florida. So as we roll into the weekend, we make fun of Florida and hope to get a chance to laugh at them for a long time to come. But first, today's also Halloween. And in some of the stuff we had going on online this week, somebody sent in a message to us. I like, obviously, Georgia football. I like Halloween, too. My kids love it. I like the Peanuts characters, and we, I think, have that today. Yeah, Kitsy Ann puts this together for us. So it's Charlie Brown and Snoopy, the Georgia hats turned around backwards for them, staring at a very scary Halloween image with a big harvest moon with that Georgia G right there. We like combining all this together. Halloween, Georgia, Florida, Peanuts, which we love. We've been watching The Great Pumpkin a lot around our household here as of late. So Kitsy gets a golden shoe for that. By the way, lousy, stinking Gators, it is going to be scary for them about 1,819 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. It's our Gator hater updater. And we think that number's going to keep on climbing, but you got to get that big win tomorrow to make that be the case. So enjoy the cocktail party. If you're traveling, be safe. We'll see you back here on Monday for DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger and all day from Jacksonville tomorrow. Have a good weekend, everybody. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. You can trust them on all that today. So as we told you, the big one is coming up on Saturday between Oklahoma and Tennessee. We're excited about that. So we'll take some comments here when we wrap up. But for now, as it relates to what we normally do, go with the flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, making all our big picks. Let's give you a special look here right now at what is going to happen between this game that we think has not just playoff implications. The loser of this game, probably eliminated from the playoffs. As a taste of go with the flow, it's the entire DawgNation team, plus our guy, Dari Payro, official pick, Tennessee and Oklahoma. Let's see that right now. Hello, DawgNation Daily and R.S. Andrews Cool Down viewers. You know, each week we do Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, where we make all the big picks on the big games from a point spread perspective, but we always save one of the best ones for you right here as a part of the R.S. Andrews Cool Down, as a way of encouraging you to hopefully click into the broadcast that you can find on the DawgNation video channels, including at YouTube, for our Go With The Flow. We'll make our pick for Georgia and Florida, Vandy going to Texas, and all the other big games of the weekend. But for this one, we've saved as I said, a very sizable one for you. What I think of as a playoff eliminator, Tennessee hosting Oklahoma. Vols are 3.5-point favorites here. Both these teams have already lost twice. You would assume that neither can afford another loss to have a reasonable and realistic chance of making the college football playoff. There's also an interesting battle of the highest scoring offense in the SEC against the best scoring defense in the SEC, both sitting at 6-2, although get there in different ways. Tennessee beats its somewhat rival Kentucky last week, 56-34. Oklahoma loses to Ole Miss. Sooners, though, 2-0 against the spread as the away team here this season. And Tennessee 2-3 against the spread thus far in SEC games on the season. Of course, we know the two that it's lost at Alabama and against Georgia way back in September. So the number here is Tennessee favored by 3.5. Mike Griffith, I come back to you.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma was a bit of fool's gold earlier in the season. They beat Michigan at home by a touchdown. It was a freshman quarterback. We just kind of oohed and awed all about it. And then they got embarrassed by Texas, a Texas team that a lot of people on this panel are picking to lose to Vanderbilt at home. Brett Venables said they had the better team, and yet they lost by 8 to Ole Miss. So if they had the better team and they could lose to Ole Miss at home, then they could have the better team and lose to Tennessee on the road, where I believe Neyland Stadium is a big factor. Tennessee has some momentum. Josh Heupel won a national championship for Oklahoma. It was a special game. He was a Heisman Trophy runner-up. He was kind of their Gunnar Stockton. So with Heupel playing the role of Gunnar Stockton, he's going to make the right play calls at the right times, and Tennessee's going to cover the spread easily and blow out Oklahoma. And we'll be talking about whether or not Brett Venables' job is safe at this time next week.
So Mike calling for a blowout. I think that's pretty interesting. Jeff Sentell, the number is 3.5. Tennessee favored over Oklahoma.
Like everything that's been said so far, playoff elimination, best defense, best offense, a little bit of fool's gold. I think I heard from our colleague, Mr. Griffith, as well. I think this comes down to two factors. I think quarterback play will be big here, and I think Neyland Stadium will be big here. I am not forecasting a blowout, but I do think Tennessee will beat Oklahoma by more than 3.5 points inside Neyland Stadium on Saturday.
So a lot of love for the Vols here right now. Connor, what about you? The number, is it 3.5?
Too much love for Tennessee here. I think I'm going to be the only person on this panel to pick Oklahoma in this game because there's no reason that I think you should pick them. I think this team is leaking oil. I know the score was 34-26 last week at home against Ole Miss, but despite Brent Venables' thoughts, I thought Ole Miss actually pretty clearly outplayed Oklahoma in that game. I think Tennessee provides a lot of the similar problems that Ole Miss did a week ago. So give me Oklahoma here, if only because I know Kaylee, Brandon, and Dari are going to join Jeff and Mike in picking Tennessee, and it's just not that easy.
So Connor, a rare prediction followed by a prediction about some predictions. We'll find out if he's correct on those. Kaylee, what about for you?
Not so fast, Connor. I'm just
So we're
kidding. Yeah,
picking-
I'm gonna
yeah.
take Tennessee. Yeah, that's honestly the easiest game for me to pick on this entire thing. Neyland at night. I think it's the second time in the last century that Oklahoma's traveled to Knoxville. 10 years ago was the first time. So yeah, I like Tennessee in this game. Easy.
So Connor is at least partially right about something in that I came into this, and on the Wednesday edition of Go With The Flow, they were giving me a hard time because I kept talking about changing my picks as I was doing the research. This is one of those in which I really did come into this really adamant that I was going to take Tennessee, and I'll tell you why. If you go back and look at the game against Alabama, a game that the point total, the final score will tell you they lost by 17 points, the truth is the actual in-game stats tell a little bit of a different story. They had more first downs in Alabama. They had more passing yards, more rushing yards, and obviously more total yards. If not for a pick six as Tennessee was marching in for a score, a 14-point swing changed a lot about that game. I really feel like, in my mind, Tennessee is among the more underrated teams in the SEC because they've mostly been forgotten after wins, or I should say losses to Georgia and Alabama, and yet they're still very much alive for the college football playoff race. And as a 3.5-point favorite at home, I came into a recording ready to say, because the Oklahoma team is starting to show some faults, they're going to win this game, they're going to beat them, and they're going to keep their playoff hopes alive, and Oklahoma will now just fall apart for the rest of the season. But the truth is, now that we're on the doorstep of being able to do this, I don't have the guts to do it for the simple reason this Tennessee defense is just terrible. It's the number one scoring offense in the SEC, but they're almost at the bottom in points allowed. And the point total they gave up to Georgia, which has proven to be a pretty good offense. But how about giving up 34 to Mississippi State, giving up 31 to Arkansas, giving up 34 to Kentucky? I can't trust that defense when you look at Oklahoma, whose defense is the best part about it, but offensively away from home this year, put up, 23 in the Cotton Bowl against Texas, scored 26 at South Carolina. I think that's enough to get inside the number here. Maybe Tennessee wins. I don't want to hedge myself too much by saying, it's a Tennessee win, but an Oklahoma cover. The point is, I came in here all about taking Tennessee because I do legitimately believe they may be a little bit underrated. But part of the reason why they're not getting much rating right now is because they're giving up a lot of points, what I think of as not very good teams. So I don't have the guts to make the pick I wanted to make. I am going to take Oklahoma plus the points, 3.5. And that actually puts the flow on the side of still Tennessee, but I like Oklahoma in this spot. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Tennessee?
Well, I could just sense the desperation coming out of Connor being at the bottom of the list in the columns where he's reaching to try to gain traction when everyone's taking all the leaders and the best pickers are taking Tennessee here. He's trying to gain some traction here. It's an interesting strategy. Some people may call it desperation. Bad decision by flip-flopping on this, Brandon. Like, Tennessee is going to have a monster win in this game. The problem with Oklahoma is Mateer does not look healthy. He does not look right. If he was 100% early in the year, I would say this game's coming down to field goal because their offense will be able to hang. But he does not look right. I like Tennessee with a double-digit victory. Neyland will be rocking.
Yeah,
Hey,
I'd like to respond to Dari. I agree that this pick will be wrong now because BA flip flopped his pick and joined me on the wrong side. Like, congratulations to the four of you, BA. Thank you for sinking the ship here this week.
well, first of all, this was a flip flop, but it was a pre flip flop. I think this was a this. I voted for it before I voted against it. Okay, this was a pre flip flop for me on that. Either way, I think it's an awesome game, and we are certainly looking forward to it. And Connor, if we're going down together, and that's just the way that's going to be. But beyond that, now we get the entire board at our disposal. You can broaden your horizons. You are not handcuffed to the 6 games we are picking for our standings. You get anything you want anywhere you want to go. Mike Griffith, what does the system say to you about the picks beyond just the 6 that we've made on our cool down and our go with the flow prior to that?
Yeah, this looks too easy. I'm wondering if I'm missing something here. We're gonna go to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where Jacksonville State is only a 3.5-point favorite. Let's remember Austin P handled Middle Tennessee in their opener. This looks like easy money. So I'm gonna take the Gamecocks. I'm gonna give 3.5 points. And then there's another pick. You know, there's a school in Raleigh, North Carolina that doesn't seem to exist for any reason but to every now and then be relevant. Well, this is their week because the Yellow Jackets are ready to be roosted from their nest. Not only will North Carolina State cover the 5.5-point spread, but they will beat Georgia Tech on Saturday. Those are my 2 best bets.
Not certainly a big pick there. If that were to come into fruition, Jeff Sentell, what about for you?
Hold up. Did the system just say that Georgia Tech's going to lose to the Wolfpack?
Apparently it did. Apparently it did.
Systematic. No coin flip there. There are 2 games on this docket that jumped to me. SMU Miami. I think it's going to be an early kick. It's going to be a different time zone. It's kind of a reeling Miami football team, and they're favored by 12.5 over the Hurricanes. I think the Hurricanes win, but I think the climate here bodes well for SMU to cover. I'm sure Rhett Lashley would like to see his name jumped into a lot of coaching search love. Then also, I can't help but look at the Penn State-Ohio State game for 2 reasons. One, I believe the over-under is 43 points, so I guess people are expecting Ohio State to win 40-3, something like that. I like that game to go over, but I also like Ohio State to cover 20.5 against Penn State. Thought we'd be picking this game no matter what, so I wanted to pick it.
I mean, I can't pick. We're not picking Penn State, Ohio State when Penn State's just squandered the whole season. Yeah, you know,
20.5, man.
We tried to broaden things out. We try to bring some different teams into the show. I take that very seriously to make sure we're reflecting a cross section of college football. But I mean, Penn State has been a total dud this year.
Hey, that wasn't a shot across your bow, man, at all for your.
No,
game
I'm
pick.
kidding. I'm kidding.
You guys realize that Dallas has a really good private commuter airport, and there's a possibility Carson Beck may fly private to this game. I think that's going to help Miami out in this game. I just wanted to interject that possible push there for the Hurricanes. Carson may be flying private to this game. Just keep that in mind.
Fair enough. Connor Riley, how about for you?
Yeah, so Jeff just taking a few of my picks, so I'm having to adjust on the fly here. We are going to start in the ACC. I did go 3-1 my best bets last week, 7-1 my last 2 weeks. We're at least doing something right here in the games that I am allowed to pick, not the ones that I am forced to pick. Now, I say that this is a stinky pick, and it feels like one of these teams is due, and I feel like one of these teams is getting a little bit of a benefit of the doubt here. I'm going to go up to a Friday game, North Carolina visiting Syracuse. I like North Carolina here as a 2.5-point underdog. They're getting close.
Do you really? Wow.
They're getting better, but it's not just that. I think this Syracuse team is dreadful. I know Fran Brown was talking to town maybe Syracuse or Clemson earlier this year. The big difference in that game, they had Steve Angeli as their quarterback for most of their game. Ricky Collins, the guy who was taken over since Angeli tore his ACL, has just been a mess. They have been an issue offensively. North Carolina dang near beat Virginia at home last week and came about an inch short. I like North Carolina here, so somewhat surprisingly. Bill Belichick going to get his first Power 4 win at North Carolina, but I don't feel all that great in this game. Another ACC school I'm going to pick this week, double-digit underdog. Wake, a 10-point underdog at Florida State. Florida State coming off a bye, a rest advantage. Wake playing with a backup quarterback last week, beat SMU at home, nearly gave the game away, then took it back with a 50-yard field goal. I like the way this team has played this season. Should have beaten Georgia Tech earlier in the year. And like, this is a Florida State team where if they don't start fast coming out of this bye, I think it's going to get real nasty there. We've heard reports that if Florida State loses this game, Mike Norvell might get fired. I think the Florida State team knows this. And so I like Wake here. And then, Jeff took them, but I like them in this instance as well. I like SMU as a double-digit underdog. I have them at 12.5. So give me SMU plus 12.5, Wake Forest plus 10, and North Carolina plus 2.5 this week.
Amazingly, looking at Florida State, we're going on now 2 years since they last won an ACC game. Obviously began the season by beating Alabama, but we're talking about like a 1-11, 1-12, something along those lines in their last, dozen or so games against ACC competition. Amazing how inept they've been in a conference that was seemingly set up for them. Kaylee Manziel, what about for you?
Let's just make it interesting. I'm gonna fade Mike on his Georgia Tech pick.
Wow.
Did you find it at 5.5 or 6.5, Mike?
I was good with 5.5.
I've seen
I'll stick with 5.5 then. I know everybody feels like at some point Georgia Tech is bound for a slip-up game, but you're not looking far enough ahead. If the slip-up game comes, it comes to Pitt, which is right before Georgia and Georgia Tech. Looking ahead to Georgia, similar to what we've seen some teams do this season. So I like Georgia Tech to keep rolling. I'll comfortably take them as a 5.5-point favorite on the road. This NC State team is not very good. I know they had the win over Virginia. That was at the beginning of the season. It's different now. So I like Georgia Tech here. And then also, too, I've got Utah as a 7.5-point favorite over Cincinnati, even though Cincinnati is ranked higher. I know that Utah had a big win against Colorado recently, but that's just not a very good Colorado team. We know the Big 12 is a strange place. So I'm going to take the underdogs. Give me Cincinnati, even though they're the higher ranked team going on the road. Big 12, weird place. I'll take the bet for Cincinnati and Georgia Tech.
Be careful about inverted point spreads. When you see the wrong team favored, be careful about that. Just be very, very careful when it comes to that sort of thing. But you may very well prove to be right, because when it comes to best bets, I haven't exactly been the world's best here. In fact, it's been a very humbling experience knowing that you can pick literally any games you want, side, total, anything in between. And yet this particular part of the show is always, at least this year, been, pretty problematic for me. The last time we did this broadcast did go 2-0, and I did so by sticking with what I knew. I took 2 SEC games, and I got them both right. So we're going to stay with that right now. Now, we've already picked sides in every SEC game for this week, so I'm going to give you a couple of totals. Because of what I mentioned earlier, little bit of a tap-out factor for an Arkansas team that may have realized that whatever magic they thought they had, the interim coach, not quite there, and a Mississippi State team that if the coach is apologizing for playing too conservative, that's probably a habit that's not going to die anytime too soon. I like under 67.5. That's a big total, by the way. Under 67.5 for Mississippi State and Arkansas. I like going under the big number there. And a little bit of a correlated parlay with what I gave you a little earlier. I like team total under 34.5 for Ole Miss in a game we expect to be closer than experts are projecting against South Carolina. Give me team total under 34.5 for Ole Miss, and the full game under 67.5 for Mississippi State and Arkansas. And Dari Payro, with that, I yield to you.
Yeah, I kind of like Wake in that FSU game, getting the points there. Where they won all their road games this year. I think they have the offense to hang, and they got a top 25 defense. So I like Wake and the points in that game. The two I'm really focused on, the two games though, is going to be Rutgers at Illinois. I love Illinois at home to cover 12.5 points. I think they're going to get it done. Rutgers is awful. I also like the Army Air Force game. Okay, I'm going to go both ways. I'm going to pound this game. I like Army minus 1.5 points. And with that, I'm going to hit it all kinds of ways with parlays as well as straight up. I love the under 49.5. So I like Army to cover and that game to go under. I think Army's going to control the clock and really shorten that game. Give me the Golden Knights.
So a big game coming up for the Commander-in-Chief trophy there between the Falcons and the Cadets. So we'll look forward to that. Good picks there from Dari Payroll. For all of you, hope, speaking of good picks from Dari and everybody else, hope you'll check out this week's edition of Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, which you can find on demand on the DawgNation video channels right now, including YouTube. And of course, with that, we'll get you back to our R.S. Andrews cool down as a part of DawgNation Daily. Thank you so much, BA. Appreciate that. And it is me back here live again right now while the video is playing. That is obviously a recorded video that we put together on Wednesday when Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, drops. I was in the various comment sections, spent some time with our friends on Facebook, DawgNation.com, YouTube as well. And the reason why I did is because I got a little bit of an issue with the recording device that we use to get the podcast ready. And so we're going to need some extra time to get this thing downloaded today, which means I got to pop off the air here. So we'll come back and do more comments on Monday. But the normal commentary, I know, is up in it a little bit because we can't stay quite as long. And obviously, we got to make our pick for Tennessee, Oklahoma there, right there. So I was in there with you just because I wasn't able to stay as long and do this here today. But I do appreciate all of you being here. If you're getting ready for a great Halloween tonight with your family and your kids, you know, it's fun to watch my kids still into it, although it starts to change a little bit of a different vibe around our Halloween, but man, still great memories from when they were younger, and still, you know, great to watch them enjoying that right now. And whatever you're doing with your own kids or your own friends or just whatever that is, I hope it's an awesome experience for you. And I hope you got your game face tomorrow ready to go. As we said, Kirby and these Georgia players, man, they are Gatorators, true and true, through and through. And so we got to be right there with them. So keep a good thought. If you're on your way to Jacksonville, be safe. Watch out for the traffic. Have a good time. If you are at home, allow DawgNation to be a part of your coverage tomorrow. Kaylee's going to have a great pregame show for you. Kicking off at 1:30. I'll see you for the DawgNation postgame show after the game on the field, reacting to what we believe is going to be another Georgia win against Florida. And a really fun November to come after that. But boy, this big rivalry game stands as the first big next step on all of that. So enjoy it. We'll be back here Monday. Also, big thanks to R.S. Andrews, who makes the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. They do all that for you. Don't let a plumbing emergency ruin this time of year for you. Halloween, football watching. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, they can replace it for you the same day. So let them do that. Online at rsandrews.com. After all, the RS stands for Rapid Service. They'll take good care of you. And we'll see you back here Monday for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Have a great weekend, everybody.